Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going very well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. Well, our pensions masterclass is closing in very fast. And one of the areas that we have a lot of fun with, Tim, is the conversation around reversionaries versus non-reversionary pensions. And this will be an area that we're going to spend a lot of time on as part of the upcoming masterclass. But today, let's sort of take a bit of a step back, Tim, and have a discussion on the various considerations that we need to contemplate if we're looking at the structuring of an income stream as reversionary versus non-reversionary. So I'm going to kick things off and look at it in the context of our transfer balance cap and the T-bar reporting. So that to me is one area that we know that there is a distinct difference from a reporting time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and I think one of the key things about this, Aaron, is we do like to have an ongoing discussion about the pros and cons of reversionary and the pros and cons of non-reversionary, and we like to pretend to take sides. Some of us will often be quite strong in our opinions on them, but I think it's one of those areas too that we always have to be reminded that everybody's circumstances are different. And so the right answer about reversionary and non-reversionary is always going to be based on an individual's circumstances. And some of these issues that we'll touch on today, but things like the transfer balance cap, certainly will sway some people one way or another, particularly if they're indifferent to a lot of the issues. And so whereas some issues, it's an absolute must in the way that you need to go down. But things like the transfer balance cap is clearly an area where there is some not reporting reprieve, because you still have reporting requirements exactly the same time, whether a pension is reversionary or not. Well, maybe not exactly the same time, but fairly similar timeframes. But you just have your credits appearing at different times, and so that can certainly be an area that weighs into the decision-making process.
And the other thing that becomes abundantly clear with the differences with reversionary and non-reversionary is that a lot of people don't look at it when they're starting pensions to line that up with their other estate planning. We always talk about binding death benefit nominations or death benefit nominations generally and making sure that lines up with the will and so forth. But we don't necessarily do that with our income streams.
No.
And absolutely you need to, because you don't just want to potentially have that amount of money defaulting to who that nominated reversionary is if we have a situation maybe with a blended family, or there is a different course of action that might want to happen here. So understanding what's happening with that bouncing ball in respect to in the event of death is crucially important as part of this process. So therefore, it may be that you don't want it reversionary, or that you may want it to be partially reversionary. And all of these things are naturally allowable. Or you go down the alternate path where you take it into a non-reversionary environment, and therefore looking at a binding death benefit nomination to provide that next step of instructions.
Yeah, and I think probably the natural flow on from that piece is the critical nature of the documentation around the pension commencement. So having that capacity to alter the terms of a pension, so whether to make a pension reversionary or to make a pension non-reversionary, and you and I, just through longevity, we know that that things are a lot easier in that regard, say post 2007, because it had significant tax ramifications previously, and so the ability to flip around wasn't so easy. And so it's not the be all and end all if you don't get the setup correct, but ultimately it's better to get it correct from the start, so that you're not putting, I guess, so you're not creating a scenario where you're relying on everybody being accepting of the changes that you've made during the terms of the pension to change one way or the other.
Yeah, well, one of the clear challenges may be that a pension has been made reversionary, and then that individual didn't intend on that being reversionary, and they've actually got to seek the approval of the trustee, i.e., in which that person that may be listed as a beneficiary and they go, well, I'm being removed. Why am I being removed? I'm not
Yeah.
going to approve this. So it can create its own challenges naturally as well. So yeah, understanding that at the beginning and therefore how it flows into some of the broader estate planning is quite important. So Tim, I guess what are some of the other areas that we need to be thinking about in this reversionary versus non-reversionary scenario?
Yeah, so for me, there's the immediate considerations that people have to be aware of. So minimum pension obligation is always one that, and we'll no doubt talk a lot about that in the session. So the minimum pension obligation, insurance. So insurance is an area that is often not discussed when it comes to pension, because the natural inclination is that, well, once you're in pension, you don't have insurance, but that's not the case. I mean, we have to consider insurance as part of the fund structure, and we now look at things like transition to retirement. So you're starting pensions a lot earlier than you're cancelling insurance policies. Yep. And so where insurance is held can also be a critical issue. And the treatment of them, if it's a reversionary versus non-reversionary, is quite different as well. So that's a consideration. So what's that? We've talked about transfer balance cap, we've talked about insurance, we've talked about minimum pension obligations. The obvious one is estate planning, and the family structure. So blended families versus non-blended families will often make that decision quite significant as well.
Yeah. ECPI is probably the other one that comes to mind, that it's a consideration, and again, understanding the nuances around whether a pension is automatically continuing or whether the pension is to be purchased in a non-reversionary environment, and therefore the ECPI considerations in respect to when a pension may be purchased at a future point in time where it's non-reversionary. So they're probably the main things that I sort of think about, as well as when you unpack all of these things, it's not simply, do you want this pension to flick from A to B because B is a tax dependent? Well, how does it all fit into the broader scheme of the client's estate planning, and then therefore all of those other elements that we just spoke about as well?
Yeah, that's right. And look, and then just for giggles, you chuck in a few of the other things like, well, do we contemplate Division 296, and do we contemplate the fact that every 10 years there is a market correction, or I'm rounding there, but there are market crashes, and the impact of reversionary versus non-reversionary on things like the transfer balance cap, but on things like tax-free and taxable status and things. So there's the quirky associated with also the stuff that you really absolutely have to be thinking about.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a topic that we'll be diving deep into at our upcoming SMSF Pensions Masterclass. Not only looking at it in the context of TRISs, like you said, Tim, we'll also be looking at it in the context of retirement income streams and around insurance-related payments through total and permanent disability as well. So you can find out more by visiting our Smarter SMSF website on our events page. Tuesday, the 27th of August. We use our Little Brewers case study and our Malthouse family. So Andrew and Mary will get a fair look at it this time, but I think once again, we've been able to capture all of our family members into this event. So we look forward to you joining us for that upcoming masterclass event. Tim, thanks again.
No worries. I can't wait to see you next week in Melbourne for the live event.
Excellent. Take care and bye for now.
Bye-bye.